Okay, last week we started more of a practical session to talk about insurance and investments. You cannot have a series on money and possessions and not talk about protection and investments. It's all intertwined together. And we left off talking about term life insurance, which is really the only kind of life insurance I think there is. Whole life we'll touch on, that's more of an investment. I think as we talked about, term life is pure protection, whether you want it for 10 years, 15, 20, 30, or for the rest of your life. I showed you the advantages of having life insurance for the rest of your life. Not as an investment, but as a death benefit for the rest of your life. Very briefly, let's mention a couple of different types of life insurance. Universal life insurance is something that came out in the 80s. What happened was interest rates went to 16%. And basically, insurance companies created a term policy with a side fund that earned money market interest rates. And so basically, you could go out and buy a life insurance policy, and if you project interest rates at 16%, that really drives your premium down. And people were taking money and cashing out old traditional whole life policies that pay 3-5% and putting it into these policies. The problems they have is typical. Most people don't review insurance on a regular basis. It goes into their drawer and they forget about it. Well, as interest rates start coming down, those policies started collapsing because the premium you were paying could not support it. And a lot of people lost their coverage, and it turned out to be a bad idea. So if you do have an old universal life policy, what I would recommend you do is you get with your insurance agent or a financial advisor and have them run what is called an in-force ledger. It's a projection of how the policy is performing. All companies will provide it. They have to provide it. And you may be shocked to find out that your policies, if you're 50 years old, your policy is going to run out at age 62. And you're just going to lose everything unless you make some adjustments in the contract.
Say the name of what you call that?
Universal life.
No, but then you get checked, the name of what you...
In-force ledger or in-force illustration. Make the companies run that for you. The newer universal life policies today, which is the only kind I personally sell, has a guaranteed death benefit. And so as long as you're paying that premium, the death benefit is guaranteed for the rest of your life. It can never lapse. And that's an important issue when you're buying insurance, because again, I don't think you should be buying insurance for investment, but I think you should be buying it for the rest of your life. And that's the best way to buy it at the cheapest possible price, this low guaranteed premium. Variable life insurance works the same as universal life. The only difference is you have the choice to invest in stocks and bonds instead of money market interest rates. And only a securities licensed person can sell you that. So there again, you know, one of the things when you look at counsel, if you get an agent that's recommending this, he may not be able to recommend B. So even if that person is a good person, and he probably is, I still might want to, if I wanted a comparison of alternatives that are securities related, you might want to get somebody to give you those comparisons as well. Your health insurance is going to be as good as it's ever going to be right now, unless you have a cold. Most of us progressively deteriorate. And there's two things that affects life insurance, and that's your age and your health. Neither one will be any better than it is today. That's why I try and encourage people, you know, think about it. If they're 50 years old and have a 10-year term, you know, do they really want to give up their insurance at 60? Do they really want to wait till they're 60 to buy a new one for another 10 years when they're older and less healthier and may not be able to get it? So if you're 50 and you want your insurance to 70, go buy a 20-year term, because now is the best time to get it. Okay, that's all I'm going to say about that. I quickly want to move on to disability income. I want to make sure everybody understands that disability income is something that protects your income. And when you buy a disability policy, you normally buy it to pay a percentage of your income. So if I make $1,000 a month, and I like to use easy math numbers for me, I could buy a policy that will pay me 60 or 70% of my income, $600–700 a month. And insurance companies will not insure $1,000 because they want an incentive for you to get well and go back to work. So they don't insure 60 to 70%. Some of them may go up to 80%. But you buy a policy as a percent of your income, or you buy a policy to cover a specific need. Let's say your mortgage. If you got a $500 a month mortgage, you might want to buy a $500 a month disability income policy to cover that mortgage. And when you buy a policy, you're looking at a couple of things. What is the waiting period before the benefits begin? You know, you can wait 30 days, 90 days, 6 months. How long you wait depends on how much you have saved that you can carry yourself. You know, it's kind of like a deductible in your automobile insurance. I would encourage you to go at least 3 months, maybe even 6 months. Because most people can get by for 6 months based on what they have, what their family will help them with. Try and keep the premium down. But 90 days, 6 months, it really drives the premium down. And then the question is, how long do I want the benefit? Do I want the benefit to last for 2 years, or do I want the benefit to last to 65? Well, if you can afford the premium, of benefit to age 65 is the best. But I'm more interested in getting my clients protected, and statistically most disabilities will be over with or you'll be dead in 2 years. So I like going after a 2-year benefit if premium's an issue. So you have a 6-month waiting period, a 2-year benefit, and that really drives the premium down. One of the things I do, not this chart, but when I look at situations, I might see automobile insurance here with uninsured motorists that they're paying $400 a year, which is kind of a double protection to your health insurance policy, because remember, uninsured motorists is bodily injury claim. And I look down in this quadrant and I see my client has no disability income. So I might take that $400 a year that they were spending on uninsured motorists and recommend they buy a disability policy for $400.
Could you explain your abbreviations and also?
Well, I will, but it's a different chart.
Okay.
For investments,
Okay.
and I want to get there, but yeah, you're right. So, you know, it's important to look at the whole picture, because a lot of times you can help a client by repositioning what they're already spending. Let's face it, you can go to any person who's going to say, you know, give me some more money and I'll make your situation better. But can you look at what I'm already paying? Can you look at what I'm doing? And can you make sure I'm spending it wisely? So anyway, disability income is something you should look at. The last thing about disability income is be aware of a statement that says, well, I got disability group insurance through my work. I'm covered for 60% of my income. I'm good.
Stops when you stop working, right?
Jeff, if your company pays you 60% of your income, and they pay the premium, which is the way most group plans pay it, those disability payments are taxable, which means you're basically going to be living on about 50% of your income. How many people, raise your hand, how many people can take a 50% pay cut right now and not miss a beat? Okay, so there again, maybe you might want to consider supplementing your group disability policy with another 10 or 20%, from a traditional carrier. And remember, because personal premiums are paid with after-tax dollars, then the benefits are tax-free, unlike the group benefits, which are paid for with company dollars or taxable. Question?
Do you have statistics on, just general statistics on the chances of becoming disabled versus, well, dying? I mean, everybody's going to die.
Yes, there is.
But I would imagine that most people in here have life insurance, but I would venture to say that a very small percentage of people have.
Yeah, like 1 in 1,000 are going to die before 65. 1 in 4 will become disabled before 65 for some period of time. And we'll talk about it next, but 1 in 2 will require long-term care.
He's living long.
1 in 2. Which is kind of a nice transition into long-term care. Long-term care is something that protects your assets. Remember, disability protected your income. Long-term care protects your assets. So, you can have a lot of assets and say, well, I'm fine, I don't need insurance. But let me tell you, if you or your spouse goes into a nursing facility, those assets will be drained in a New York second. Okay, the cost is very expensive today, and you have to virtually have nothing to go into a state facility. And if you do go into a state facility, the state will take whatever assets you have before. And you can't hide them. As a Christian, you shouldn't be hiding them. But you can't hide them, because they go back and they look at whether you transfer an asset out of here or there. So, long-term care is something at some point people, can start looking at. Because I'm in the business, I'm aware of these things. And just to give you an idea, my wife and I bought a long-term care policy that pays $3,000 a month each when we were 50. And I realize those costs are probably up now because, $3,000 probably won't get it today. But that joint policy cost me $100 a month, which is very reasonable. And so if she or I go into a nursing home, or better yet, because we don't want to go in a nursing home, if we use the $3,000 a month to pay a nurse to come to our home, which we can do, then there's a $3,000 a month benefit. And I hope I never have to use it, but it's there. And if you buy it before you get too old, it can be very reasonable. The older you get, I'm 70 now, so if I were to buy it today, it would cost me a whole lot more than $100 a month. Now, there is one other alternative that we're getting clients to look at today, and that is an alternative to a CD. For example, if I have a CD, let's say I have an older client that really doesn't want to pay these high long-term care premiums, or they're not healthy enough to qualify for them, that person still would like to protect their assets. Well, if they're sitting here with a $100,000 CD paying 2%, we can put them into a single premium annuity with an insurance company that maybe pays 1%, which is no big deal, obviously. But here's the deal. If they go into a nursing home, that $100,000 annuity will pay out $400,000 in benefits. If they die, it'll pay $200,000 in death benefits. So it becomes an alternative It's not a good investment, okay? Let's remember that. Not a good investment, but it's a good protection vehicle as a means to provide these benefits that you couldn't ordinarily do with a monthly premium policy. Okay, any questions on insurance before we move on? John?
What's too young to buy long-term care disability?
I think that's a great question. You know, I determined it was younger than age 50. When I hit age 50, I felt like that was the time for me to buy it. I really wouldn't recommend it for you. I think you're too young. Recommend it for Steve.
I think you.
Larry, let me just say, Billy had that for her mom, and at one time her mother didn't think she should keep it up, and she did anyway, and she was so glad, because Joyce lived with around the clock, for 5 years, around the clock healthcare,
Wow.
24 hours.
Yeah.
That could be expensive.
It wasn't no $3,000 a month either. That wasn't nearly a drop in the bucket.
It varied, it went up as economy costs went up.
Mhm.
I mean, it increased over the 5 years to where she continually had
It was good.
godsend.
John Drivers, yes.
Yeah, Larry, I don't know if you can address this, and this is something that I struggle with all the time. I look at myself as having a pile of resources and buckets that I have to put those resources in. Things I have to spend, things I have to buy, things I have to purchase. One of those buckets is the church. One of those buckets is the missionaries I support outside of the church. Other charitable contributions, okay? And insurance, and savings, and all the other things, all the other buckets I have. So sometimes I really struggle in saying, you know, I'm putting this money here in this insurance thing. Am I trusting in God to take care of me? And instead of trusting in God, I'm relying on myself and my money to take care of me now. Should I take that money and support another missionary instead? How do you deal with the quandary of, I think everybody knows what I'm saying, because we all face this issue.
I know exactly. I know exactly what you're saying. I remember years ago when I lived in Indiana, I wound up talking. I was new in the insurance business, but I wound up talking to a young couple from the church with 3 children, and he had no life insurance. And I said, "Gee, you know, you really need to have some life insurance." And I showed him some term insurance, and he said, "Well, we don't need any life insurance because God will take care of my wife and kids if something happens to me." And I said, "He is. He sent me." He still didn't promise it.
I think God wants us to use our brains to help ourselves. Like, why do you wear a seatbelt if you think God's going to take care of you? Why don't you go stand on the highway and let the 18-wheeler see if it's going to kill you when it passes over you? You know,
Well,
I mean, there's a part we have to use our brains and our resources and to do what we can do, but that doesn't mean we're not letting God do His part.
But I
Yeah,
guess what I'm
well,
asking is,
let me answer that, John, because it's a good question, and I wanted to go beyond my little joke here. That's a different issue, really, you know, just not wearing a seatbelt. I think it's really a different issue. I think, you know, people, especially Christians, can get caught up in, well, I know Christians that think the rapture is going to happen tomorrow. You know, we cannot plan, and God tells us to plan for the future. In other words, be ready if the rapture is tomorrow. Be ready to go. But assume you're not. Assume it's not tomorrow. Assume that you're going to live a long life. You know, otherwise you get caught up in, well, I'm not going to worry about saving for my retirement or insuring my family, if some insure me for my family's benefit. You know, all through scriptures, we're told to do things in certain ways. Seeking counsel, we talked about it. Honesty, debt. You know, all of these things are all issues that are everyday issues for all of us. Savings, retirement. God wouldn't be talking about this in the Bible if it wasn't important. And I think there's things that we have to do that make sense. you know, from a financial perspective, John, that we do because it's the right thing to do, because what if this happens? You know, these are protections out there for us. Otherwise, if you pay off your home, you could say, I'm not going to carry mortgage insurance. You know, you don't have to carry it. The only reason you have to carry it is if you have a mortgage and the bank has it. But if you pay off your mortgage, you could drop your homeowner's insurance. How many people would drop their homeowner's insurance? All right, in Louisiana, I'm getting tongue-tied. Your homeowner's insurance, if you live in South Louisiana, costs you about 1% of the value of the home. So if you have a $200,000 home, you're paying $2,000 a year for homeowner's insurance. But you're not going to drop it because you do not want to take on that risk yourself. So you're paying $2,000 a year. It surprises me how many people have $1 million in their 401k plan and don't want to pay a 1% fee to protect it against stock market loss or whatever. So an asset is an asset, and am I spending wisely? Am I making the right choices? Somebody had a
I
question.
did. I think it all depends where your situation is. If the Lord provides for you to buy that insurance, you're a fool if you don't. But if you don't have it, what can you do?
That's right.
You gotta trust. I mean, I know when we were missionaries out in the mountains in Peru, we had nothing. We didn't have a salary. We didn't have nothing. So the Lord took care of us direct, straight. I mean, when my daughter was born, I didn't even have health insurance, but the church provided and paid every single thing on a type 1, A+ clinic. I mean, if I'm working directly for the Lord, He'll take me direct care of me.
Yeah,
But if I have the means and I don't use them to protect myself, that's silly. You know?
That's a good point. I don't want to mislead people about this entire study. You know, we can talk about what's scriptural, we can talk about what's practical. You know, I realize some people can't pay cash for a car. You know, some people have to go into debt to buy. You know, everybody has to look at their particular situation, whether it's insurance, investments, debt, whatever the situation may be. What we're told biblically is to look to Scripture first and see what Scripture says about something. And if we have the ability to do that, then do it.
You're pointing out options.
Right. And this part is a little difficult because it's more practical ideas. There's not a whole lot of scripture we're going to find about insurance. There's some about investments, and let's start with Proverbs 21:20. The wise man saves for the future, but the foolish man spends whatever he gets. You know, savings is all about attitude, and it's about discipline, and especially with young people. You know, start saving early and start creating the habit. Guys, Troy looks like the only young guy around here. Start saving soon, Troy. It doesn't matter how much you save. You know, we can give you the old 10% number, but start saving money soon. You know, it's amazing when you look at the statistics. I don't have them in front of me. But how old are you, Troy?
30.
30. If you started saving now and you saved $2,000 a year for 10 years, you know, you're going to have X dollars, even though you don't save any more after 10 years. When you're 65, you're going to have a nice pile of money. All right. If you wait till you're 40 and save the same $2,000 a year for 25 years, remember the other example, you saved for 10 years and stopped? If you wait to 10 years and 40 and save for 25 years the same amount of money, you're going to have half as much as retirement. Half as much. That's the magic of compound interest. So if you start early, even if you quit, you're going to have way more than if you wait till late to start. You're going to have a steeper hill to climb. You know, if there's anything we can look at in the scriptures, it's telling us that, you know, we are to be disciplined savers. we ought to be plotted, hopefully I have the scripture somewhere, but we need to plot ahead, you know, and be consistent and keep moving forward.
Unfortunately, Larry, you gotta, in the formula, you gotta put inflation and all that too, you know. Every 10 years, what, all expensive items double,
Yeah.
just about, seems
Yeah.
like.
Yeah, I remember when I was a kid growing up in the 3rd Ward of New Orleans, I lived right down the street from Mandina's restaurant. And my brother and I would walk down the street with a quarter. And for a quarter, we got a roast beef pool boy and a box root beer
All right.
for 25 cents.
You really are old, huh?
So money ain't what it used to be. It ain't what it used to be. Remember Joseph? What about the story of Joseph where he saved for 7 years when there was great abundance? He was preparing for the future, you know?
I think it's good to say, get your kids a piggy bank. It's not all about a cute little.
Well, you know, that's habit. You know, most of us, I watch us in church. When we have the older ones, when we have our grandkids there, we pull out $1 and give our grandkids $1 to put in the plate. You know, the real point of that is we're teaching our kids that giving is a part of what we do. Okay? It's not the dollar. We know the kids didn't earn it, but we're kind of giving them some discipline and saying, hey, this is what we do, this is the way we give. So discipline and habits are important. Proverbs 30, 24 to 35 says, ants are creatures of little strength, yet they store up their food in the summer. Okay.
What you said? Proverbs what? 30?
Proverbs
24 to
30
35.
verses 24 to 35.
Okay.
The first thing I want to talk to about investments is to give you an understanding in the terminology of non-qualified versus qualified. When we talk about non-qualified money, we're talking about money that has already been taxed. This is after-tax money. You're going to go buy a CD with it or buy a mutual fund, or you're going to make some sort of investment. It's after-tax money, and you're paying the taxes as you go. So if you want to use that money to buy something with, and you take it out of the investment, it's not taxable. Now I'm going to back up a little bit because it depends on what the investment vehicle was. If you put it in a tax-deferred vehicle and you take money out, you're going to pay taxes on the gain. Meaning if I put $10,000 in it and now it's worth $12,000 and I take the $12,000 out, I'm going to have to pay taxes on the $2,000. But if it's not a tax-deferred vehicle, then you're paying your taxes along the way, and you can take it out. We also use what is called a LIFO accounting method now, which is last in, first out. It used to be that you could put, you know, $10,000 in a savings, it grew to $2,000, and you could take $5,000 out and it wouldn't be taxable because that was considered principal. But now if you took $5,000 out, you'd have to report $2,000 for taxes and $3,000 because the first money, it's on a FIFO accounting method, and that tax law was changed. Because before that tax law was changed, we, as advisors, would have doctors put $1 million in an account and take out $100,000 a year for 10 years free, tax-free, and let their children worry about the taxes. No, I was a bad guy. Qualified plans include money you're putting in before taxes. In other words, it's typically your 401k at work, or a pension or profit sharing plan, or an IRA. In other words, you're taking a tax deduction for putting this money in, And so when you take it out, it's all taxable, both principal and interest, because you've never paid taxes on it. So qualified and non-qualified, that's just a basic understanding. Incidentally now, what I think is one of the greatest things since sliced bread is the Roth IRA. The Roth IRA is the reverse of a traditional IRA. You don't take a tax deduction for putting the money in, but when you take it out, it all comes out tax-free, both principal and interest. So for a young guy like Troy, you know, that's a big benefit to have a Roth IRA. Skip the deduction now, and boy, all of that money piles up and it becomes tax-free. And we know where tax rates are going. You know, we believe they're going to be good under Trump because he says so, and we think it's going to happen. We don't know it's going to happen. But what we do know is 10 years from now, 20 years from now, we're probably going to be in a higher tax bracket than we are today. So that's a good advantage. The problem with us as we get older is we really need that tax deduction. You know, we want that tax deduction, so we forego the Roth and we go to traditional so we can get that tax deduction on our taxes. But the longer you wait, you know, if you get older and you have an IRA late in life, it's not going to benefit you that much for a Roth IRA anyway because you don't have enough of years for it to accumulate and you to take advantage of the tax-free. A little bit about stocks and bonds. Let's get very basic here. Stocks is an equity instrument and bonds is a debt instrument. So if I'm General Motors and you want to buy some of my stock, you're buying a piece of General Motors and you own a small piece of General Motors. You own stock in General Motors. You're an equity owner. And you're looking at two things. You're looking at the share price going up, which is where I get a gain. And if the company is a dividend-paying company, you're looking for income from the dividend side. So it could be income and growth, where you're getting the growth of the share price plus the dividend, but you're an equity owner. If General Motors wants to float a bond, and for example, if General Motors needs money to build a new building, and they go to the bank, and the bank's going to charge them 6% on the loan. If they can go to you and sell you a bond that pays 4%, it's a good deal for you because you're only getting 2% from your CD. So you might say, hey, 4% is a nice return. It's a good deal for General Motors because they're paying 4% for the money instead of paying 6% from the bank. But now you're lending money to General Motors. It's a loan. And General Motors agrees to pay you back. It might be a 5-year bond and they pay you 4% for 5 years, and at the end of 5 years you get your principal back and you find a new bond. So there's equity and debt. The thing to concern yourself with bonds is interest rates. Like right now we're in a very low interest rate environment, but if interest rates go up, the value of your bond portfolio is going to go down. So we're reevaluating 401k clients right now for bond positions. You see, if you look at it from a very simple standpoint, Jeff, if you were to come to me and buy a 5-year bond that pays 4%, and 2 years from now you need the money, you want to sell it. Let's say you gave me $10,000 for the bond. How much can I sell it for 2 years from now
Depends on
to
the
get you your money?
Depends on the interest rate.
Absolutely. If interest rates go up to 5 or 6%, and Steve wants to buy a bond is he gonna buy a new one from me paying 5 or 6%, or is he gonna buy your old one paying 4%? Which one do you think he wants to buy?
No.
We don't have a market for your bond unless we discount it. So maybe Steve will put up $9,000 to buy your 4% bond because he figures that's about the same as me putting $5,000 up to get a 6% bond. I don't mean to be clouding y'all with a lot of information, but what I want you to get out of it is if interest rates are going up, the value of your bond fund is going down. Conversely, if interest rates went to 2% and Steve wanted to buy a bond, would he buy mine at 2% or yours at 4%? Yours. Or you're going to sell it to him at face value for $10,000, or do you want $11,000 for it maybe? See, you got some power there because interest rates are going down, which helps you in a bond fund. So if you're holding bonds or thinking about buying bonds, you have to ask yourself, where do I think interest rates are going 5 years from now? If I think they're going down, a bond's a good idea. If I think they're going up, bond's not so good an idea.
As long as you're able to hold the bond all the way to maturity, you still get everything.
That's true. You know, the question is, you know, if I have a bond, if I have a single bond and I'm willing to hold it to maturity, then yes, you know, I'll get that back. Although I have buying power because I'm tied up in that bond with other interests. But here's the thing, most people don't hold single bonds, they hold bonds in a bond fund. And it don't matter, if I've got a bond fund in my 401k, I can't wait until 5 years from now and then I'm going to get all my money back. No, that bond portfolio could continue to go down until I'm ready to retire and never come back up.
But at the purchase, that interest is locked in to maturity, correct?
Yes.
If it's a single bond,
Okay.
and if it's a single government bond, you can avoid, you know, we're talking about municipal bonds now that you hear about it, can be free from federal income tax. And if it's a Louisiana municipal bond, good luck with that one. But if it's a Louisiana municipal bond, then it would be free from state taxes as well.
So Larry, so a good rule of thumb, just don't tie everything up in bonds. Just
Yeah,
have maybe a little.
You know, the real rule of thumb we look at is traditionally, you start with tradition and then you work on circumstances. You know, traditionally a moderate investor who's a 5 on a scale of 1 to 10 should have a pretty good mixture evenly of stocks and bonds. And as they're younger and more aggressive, you want that to be weighted heavily toward equities. And as they're older and closer to retirement, you weight it more toward bonds. But you got to look at the situation, and right now when you look at the situation, you got to throw that factor into and say, you know, do I really want my moderate client to have 50% of bonds in his portfolio? There's also more diversification. You know, what you're looking for in investments, I can tell you, is diversification. You know, you're looking not only for diversified stocks and bonds, you're looking at diversification within those stocks, and we'll talk about it, but international stocks are good to be a part of it. You know, if we look at the equity markets over the last 10 years, you know, how many times has the U.S. market been in the top 10 over those last 10 years? Maybe 2 times? So there's a lot of other markets that if you don't get involved in some international, but you know, you also have to be careful. I never recommend more than 5–10% in international, but it's good for diversification. We recommend alternative investments or non-traditional investments, oil and gas, real estate, gold and precious metal, more opportunities to be diversified. You know, the problem with diversification is if one particular market is blowing and going, you're not going to have as much success because you're also in some markets that are not blowing and going. But when that one market's going down, you're better protected because you're more diversified. And now we can talk about this chart. Stocks are looked at basically they're looked at first in terms of size. You know, large companies, small companies, and mid companies. And companies are looked at it in terms of what they call capitalization. So this is large cap value, large cap growth, mid cap value, mid cap growth, small cap value, and small cap growth. And if you held the fund that had both small cap value and small cap growth, it might be called a small cap blend. Or if you had mid cap growth and value, it might be blend, and large cap, it might be blend. Large cap companies are companies we all heard of and know of, General Motors, AT&T, all of your biggies. Obviously, this is going to be more conservative than this. And as Steve pointed out before we started, it's a case of risk tolerance. In other words, risk reward. Small companies have more opportunities for gain and growth than large companies. How much bigger can Walmart get? Okay. My company's the Advantage Network. I would be here. Well, maybe I'd be here. But you understand that small cap companies, if I started shooting off some small cap companies you probably never heard of. You may have heard some mid cap companies. Mid cap companies are in between. They want to be small cap. One that comes to mind is Outback Steakhouse, is a mid cap company. One of the things you generally see here is income and growth funds. You know, income funds meaning they're also paying a dividend. I like to call large cap funds that pay dividends defensive funds, because even when the market's going down, most of the times those companies are still paying dividends, and your dividends, if they're being reinvested, are really buying more shares because of the price of the shares going down. So it's a little less risky, a little defensive. And on the value side, basically money managers tend to look at which companies, really when you look at the whole picture, they should be worth more than they're actually worth. You know, there's something out there preventing that right now, so they're good buys. But anyway, getting back to my point, the only reason I'll show you this chart is that I'll look at 401k clients' accounts, and they'll tell me they're diversified, and they got Fidelity large cap growth, and they got Oppenheimer large cap growth, and they got Vanguard large cap growth. And so they're diversified because they got 3 funds. Well, all of those funds are holding the same top 10 investments. They're not diversified. I try and get people to start thinking about, let's play the 4 corners. Let's get a little diversified. Or let's go here. So be sure, you know, all of you that have 401k, get 401k statements. And if you don't have an advisor that helps you look at it, then look at it yourself and just see what it says. You know, do I have, usually all of those funds in your 401k will classify it as one of these, and make sure they're not all in one particular area, that you kind of diversify in that around. If you heard of the term brokerage funds, brokerage accounts, that's an account with a advisor that basically allows you to buy individual stocks and bonds. You know, you can buy other things in them, but individually you can say, I want to buy 3 shares of Walmart or this or that. And so these brokerage accounts allow you to do that. And the only problem I have with brokerage accounts is that if that's all the money you have and you don't have enough to put in that brokerage account, we can't give you very much diversification. You're better off going into maybe mutual funds where you can get more diversification. Or the popular things now is ETFs, which are exchange traded funds. And they have a real benefit because again, I don't want to get too complicated here, but Jeff, if I'm holding a mutual fund for you and the market's crashing and you call me and want me to sell, I can only sell at the close of market. But if you have exchange traded funds and you call me to sell, I can sell right now at 11:30, but not on Sunday. So, I'm trying to just briefly run through some things. There's a lot of information about that, some good and some bad, about annuities. Most people are unfamiliar with annuities. Most people think about annuities as something that I give you my money in exchange for an income. And that's kind of what happens at retirement, is that when you go to retire, one of your options, as opposed to taking a lump sum, is to take an income for the rest of your life, or the rest of you and your wife's life, or different various payouts. You're basically giving your retirement fund to an insurance company, who in exchange is giving you a guaranteed income for a period of time or for the rest of your life. And that's not good or bad, it just means that that's an option. And one of the things I tell you is to go ahead and get quotes yourself. Because if I'm working for Exxon and Exxon is using insurance company A, they're just getting a quote. And you might want to go to a different insurance company and say, well, if I took a lump sum and gave it to them, would they make a higher payout to me? You have that option. So, you know, get some quotes and make sure if you are going the income route, you're getting, you know, the better payout to it. Those are known as single premium immediate annuities, and that's what most people think about annuities. But it's different today. Insurance companies are competing with banks, and they sell what is called a deferred annuity. Like right now, you could buy a 5-year deferred annuity paying 4%. You probably can't get a 5-year CD paying 4%. Both of them are subject to surrender charges if you cancel it within the 5-year period. The banks allow you to take out interest every year. The insurance companies allow you to take 10% out every year. The bank is insured by FDIC. The insurance company is insured by the state. If you do business in the state of Louisiana, each company has to put up a reserve fund that protects annuity holders. There's never been anybody that's lost any money in annuities. So look at what's giving you, you know, the best rate of return. Look at what time I'm willing to go out with this money, and that might depend on what other assets you have. You know, the first thing I tell everybody, if I start back from the beginning, is to save some money, especially young. I keep picking on you, Troy, but you know, young guys need to put some money in the bank first before they think about investing. I recommend 3 months' income before you even think about investing. Get some money in the savings. But what I've got here, in other words, if I got other assets that are liquid, I'm more likely to buy a 5-year product that's going to pay me more interest because I got other assets. But if this is my only asset, I might not want to tie it up for 5 years. So these are all things to think about. There's 3 types of annuities right now. There's fixed, there's index, and there's variable. Fixed pays you a guaranteed interest rate, like I said, 4% over 5 years, for example. Variable puts your money in stocks and bonds, and it will go up or down with the market. So if the market's good, you make money. If the market's bad, you lose money. So that's a matter of risk-reward. Do I want the fixed guarantee? Do I want to invest money in the market? The problem we have with investing money is what happens if there's a market decline, and you know, we never know when that's going to happen. What has become popular today is insurance companies adding a lifetime income rider. And what that says is, okay, I can have my cake and eat it too, because I can still invest in the stock market but my money's growing at 7% a year guaranteed for income purposes. So if I put 100,000 in, and next year I'm ready to retire, and the market goes down and my investment is worth $90,000, I can still draw income from 107,000 because I was guaranteed to have a 7% rate of return. So, you know, I've got some protection. The trade-off is you're going to pay more fees. You know, I tell everybody there's no such thing as a free lunch. You know, you're going to pay more fees in an annuity contract that's going to guarantee you 7%. But I go back to it, you know, I find that generally it's maybe 1% more than traditional investments. And there again, you know, you're going to pay 1% to buy homeowners insurance, but you don't want to pay 1% to protect your investment. So all of these are just alternatives for you to think about. We talked about alternative investments. Real estate is another alternative investment for those people that don't want the headaches of buying and managing real estate and trying to flip it and all of those good things. You can buy a real estate investment trust. It's an investment in multiple real estate projects. So I'm just investing and I got a share price in that, and hopefully the share price eventually goes up. I can be very happy with an investment that's paying me 6%, say, from a real estate deal without having too much concern about the fluctuation of the share price. Because if you're buying it, you should be buying it for income, whether it's now or in the future. And, you know, where are you going to get 6% income today? So it's a good income vehicle, especially if you're getting ready to retire and looking to diversify where I'm going to get income from. I kind of like, you know, there's some good ones out there. But anyway, again, it's another alternative. There's some tax shelters out there, especially in the area of oil and gas. I would tell you to try and avoid them because a lot of people don't understand the risk there. They can actually, if it defaults, come after your other assets. So you got to be very careful with these tax shelters. Viatical settlements. How many people are familiar with viatical settlements?
Is that when your garage is sinking lower than your house?
We have some older clients that will come to us with a contract that they no longer want, a life insurance contract that they no longer want because they feel like they don't need it anymore and they want to cash it in or surrender it. And we can actually go to a source that will buy that life insurance policy from them because they know the math. They know you're going to die. It's just a question of time. And their organization is perpetual. So what they do is they'll pay you cash for that life insurance contract. And then they'll take over the payments. You sign over the ownership to them. They'll take over the payments. And they'll keep it in force until you die and get the tax-free death benefits. And it's interesting in some cases where if you cash it in, and let's say the cash value was $20,000, they might give you $30,000 for it. So you can actually get more for it from them than from just cashing it in. Life insurance is something we talked about quickly. It can be an investment. I think you kind of have to go through your other investments before you're looking for other investments such as life insurance. It can be very well if the policy is structured right, because you can have the least amount of death benefit, which creates, and then fill it up with cash, and it'll create a lot of tax-free income down the road. But you just have to look at it carefully. Be diversified. Class C's 11.2 says, divide your portion to 7 or even to 8, for you do not know what misfortune may occur on this earth. balance your investment, okay? Nothing is wrong with being wealthy, as long as we have the right attitude. We're not pursuing wealth itself. If God allows us to be wealthy, there's nothing wrong with that. We shouldn't be ashamed of it, but we shouldn't be focused on it. And we should be generous. Put no confidence in your assets. You don't know what's going to happen in the future. 1 Timothy 6:17, instruct those who are rich in this present world would not to fix their hope on the uncertainty of riches, but on God who richly supplies us with all things to enjoy. Proverbs even talks about inheritances. 13:22, a good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children. 2 Kings 21, thus says the Lord, set your house in order, for you shall die. I think that's probably referring to a will. Get a will. And don't use one of these CD wills, the textbook wills, because trust me, they're not geared for Louisiana. You need an attorney that's familiar with Louisiana intricacies, and a will is a good idea, maybe even a trust fund. You know, you got to remember, if you and your spouse die today, your children are going to inherit all your assets when they're 18. Heather, your daughter may be fine at 18, but if your son's like my sons, they won't be fine at 18. Do you really want your son to get his share at age 18? Is he going to be wise enough to spend it? Do you want to have a trust that says maybe they don't get it till they're 21 or 25?
Actually, in the case of my kids, it might be that.
Might be that. Well, traditionally, I hate to say it, but traditionally girls are smarter than guys. They mature a little quicker, you know, etc. Okay, I realize I'm running out of time here. So here's my final thought on investing. You might go all the way on your financial journey, but without a relationship with Christ, it won't have any lasting value. If you have asked Christ into your life, you have made the most important decision anyone could ever make. If anyone here has not yet made that decision, I encourage you to seek out Pastor Eric or any of the elders and get more information. I am certain they will be happy to talk to you. Eric, would you